With some breaking news this afternoon, the U.S. Attorney's Office delivering remarks after a federal grand jury indicted Vance Boelter on 6 federal counts.
Boelter is accused of assassinating House Speaker Melissa Hortman and her husband Mark last month. Authorities say Boelter also seriously injured State Senator John Hoffman and his wife Yvette. You may remember this happened about a month ago. Let's listen in.
We're investigating and prosecuting Vance Boelter for the political assassination of Melissa Hortman, the murder of her husband Mark Hortman, the attempted assassination of John Hoffman, and the shooting and attempted shooting of his wife Yvette and daughter Hope. We are here today to announce that a federal grand jury has returned a 6-count indictment against Vance Boelter. I'll review those charges with you now. Count 1 of the indictment charges the defendant with the stalking of Melissa Hortman with the intent to murder Melissa Hortman and her husband, Mark Hortman. This charge carries a sentence of up to life in prison. Count 2 charges the defendant with stalking Senator John Hoffman with the intent to murder Senator Hoffman, along with his wife, Yvette Hoffman, and their daughter, Hope Hoffman. This charge carries a sentence of up to life in prison. Count 3 charges the defendant with the murder of Melissa Hortman. This is a capital offense. It carries a penalty of life imprisonment or death. Count 4 charges the defendant with the murder of Mark Hortman. This too is a capital offense that carries a penalty of up to life in prison or death. Count 5 charges the defendant with the shooting of Melissa and Mark Hortman using a firearm during a crime of violence. This charge carries a sentence of up to life in prison. And count 6 charges the defendant with the shooting of John and Yvette Hoffman and the attempted shooting of their daughter, Hope Hoffman, using a firearm during a crime of violence. It too carries a sentence of up to life in prison. Now, this indictment includes a notice of special findings. These special findings are the first step towards seeking the death penalty against defendant Vance Boelter. The ultimate decision as to whether to seek the death penalty will not come for several months and will ultimately be decided by Attorney General Bondi with input from the Capital Case Unit in the Department of Justice, along with this office and the victims. We're here today not only to announce the charges, but also to provide an update on the investigation so far. And the investigation of these horrific crimes.
Apologize. We're just having some technical problems bringing you that news conference, but you heard the gist of it. The U.S. Attorney's Office here in Minnesota announcing that Vance Boelter has been indicted on 6 counts in the shootings of the Hoffmans and then also the murders of Mark and Melissa Hortman.
That was Acting U.S. Attorney Joseph Thompson that we just heard from, and we can just briefly go through these charges again. The grand jury returning the indictment that the feds were seeking, and there are 6 federal charges listed there. Count 1 was the stalking of Melissa Hortman with intent to murder. Count 2, stalking of John Hoffman, intent to murder. Count 3, the murder of Melissa Hortman through use of a firearm. That's a capital offense, and this is where the death penalty phase would come in if the Justice Department decides to seek that. And then, of course, there were 3 more charges. Federal count 4, Mark Hoffman through the use of a firearm, capital offense. That was the attempted murder, life or death on that one. Shooting of Melissa and Mark Hortman, offense, life there. And then federal count 6, shooting of John and Yvette, attempted shooting of them and their daughter Hope, a firearms offense. That also carries a life sentence.
There are state charges in this case, but then there are these additional federal charges, and that's what we were hearing about today and what we're talking about. Because this is a federal case, then the death penalty does become an option for prosecutors. And you heard Acting U.S. Attorney Joseph Thompson talking about these special findings that they listed in this grand jury indictment today. These special findings findings do allow them to build a case to go to the Department of Justice and ask for the death penalty. And we will have our reporter, Maury Glover, tell us whether or not they do say at the end of this press conference whether they intend to seek the death penalty in this case, but certainly an option. And the grand jury, just for a little bit of background, is like a checks and balances in the federal court system. It's a panel of regular citizens like a jury, but they meet in private. It's anonymous. And after a prosecutor brings charges, that grand jury, to prevent like a rogue prosecutor or something like that, it goes to that panel as well to affirm those charges. And that's what happened today.
And the presumption is that the federal charges would preempt or trump the state charges. There are 4 state charges. There's the murder, second degree, Melissa Hortman, murder, second degree, Mark Hortman, attempted murder, John, and attempted murder, Yvette Hoffman. So there are 4 state charges, but the presumption is that if the feds do seek a death penalty, that the federal charges could be the only charges or the only court case that we likely would see. We may have that press conference back up. Let's listen in.
At this point, while Boelter was talking to Mark Hortman at the front door, Brooklyn Park police officers arrived at the scene to conduct a welfare check of the Hortmans. Those officers had learned of the shooting at Senator Hoffman's home in Champlin and went to check on Representative Hortman. Moments after they arrived at the scene, Boelter fired a volley of gunshots into the Hortman home. Brooklyn Park police officers immediately fired at Boelter as he charged forward into the Hortman home. In the moments that follow, the Hortman security footage captured audio of another volley of gunshots. At the same time, the squad car video shows several muzzle flashes through the window in the stairwell of the Hortman home. As law enforcement later discovered, Boelter shot and killed Mark Hortman at the entryway to the house. Boelter then moved past the fallen Mr. Hortman and into the home, where he shot Representative Melissa Hortman several times at close range, killing her as she attempted to flee up the stairs. Boelter then fled out the back door of the home. In those same moments, you can hear Boelter kill the Hortman's dog, their golden retriever, Gilbert. FBI agents who responded to the scene found the dog, brought it to a veterinarian, an emergency vet, and tried to save it, although it later passed from its injuries. I want to provide an update as to the firearms that were recovered. We recovered both guns that were used that night. As you heard previously, that morning, when investigators responded to the Hortman home, they found a disassembled Beretta 92 9mm handgun and at least 3 magazines that were strewn about in the yard. Actually used to shoot the Hoffmans earlier that night in Champlin. A couple days later, officers found in a pond near the Hortman home another Beretta 9mm handgun. And forensic testing has shown that that was the weapon that Boelter used to shoot the Hortmans that night, and he'd actually purchased it previously. When we last spoke, we promised that the team that you see here standing before you would work tirelessly and round the clock to answer the questions. And there's 2 main questions here, the who and the why. Who, if anyone, helped Vance Boelter commit these crimes, and why did he do it? We don't know all the answers yet, but I want to tell you what we can and provide the additional details that we can to ensure the public knows as much as possible about this crime. First off, as to the who, while the investigation remains ongoing, I'm confident that Vance Boelter acted alone. There is no evidence that anyone else helped him carry out these crimes that night. That leaves us with the why. Why did Vance Boelter do this? Why did he carry out this political assassination? That's a harder question. The investigation has confirmed that this was an act of political extremism. Vance Boelter set out that night to commit a targeted political assassination. His targets were State Senator John Hoffman, State Representative Melissa Hortman, and other politicians here in Minnesota. At least on the night of June 14th, he appears to have been shown that Vance Boelter had spent months investigating his targets. He had names, he had lists of names of people that he was interested in investigating, addresses, names of their family members. He appears to have conducted surveillance at least some of the houses. As I mentioned a month ago, Mr. Boelter did not leave behind a manifesto or a screed explaining his political beliefs or his philosophy. He didn't leave behind a large volume of writings on that topic. There's little evidence showing why he turned to political violence and extremism. What he left were lists of names, politicians in Minnesota, lists of politicians in other states, lists and names of attorneys at national law firms. And as has been reported, he also left behind a letter. During the manhunt that weekend, Boelter drove to an area near his farmhouse in Green Isle, Minnesota. He abandoned a car there with a cowboy hat on the hood of the car. And inside of that car, he left a letter. Now, that letter is going to become public here today in the search warrant, and I want to talk a little bit about it here right now. The letter is addressed to the FBI Director, Kash Patel. It's a handwritten letter. In it, Vance Boelter confesses to being the man who shot the Hoffmans and the Hortmans that night and who had been on the run all weekend. In the letter, Vance Boelter claims that he had been trained by the U.S. military off the books and that he had conducted missions on behalf of the U.S. military in Asia, the Middle East, and Africa. In his letter, Vance Boelter claims that Governor Tim Walz of Minnesota wanted him and approached him about killing United States Senator Amy Klobuchar and Tina Smith. Boelter claims in the letter that he wanted nothing to do with Governor Walz's plan and that he would go public if he insisted. Boelter claims that people threatened to hurt his family if he didn't participate in this plan to murder Senators Klobuchar and Smith. Boelter says in his letter that he met with people to talk about the request. And then when he arrived at the meeting, some people were waiting to kill him. Boelter wrote that he was able to get away and that he went back a short time later and shot those people. The letter, as I said, is contained in an unsealed search warrant and will be made public. As I mentioned a month ago, my office is committed to being as transparent as possible in this case in light of the legitimate public interest in the case and to ensure the information in the public record is as accurate as possible. I want to leave you all with this. Vance Boelter committed a terrible act of political violence and extremism, a targeted political assassination that was unprecedented in the state of Minnesota. It's been a terrible personal tragedy for the Hoffman and Hortman families, and it's something that has rocked the entire state of Minnesota and even the country. This indictment represents the next step in our efforts to hold the man responsible for this crime, Vance Boelter, responsible for his actions. Thank you. Yes, Luke.
Mr. Thompson, it may be obvious, but he wasn't trained by the U.S. military. This is all fantasies. Can you say that?
Yes, I agree.
Do you think this is, he's legitimately delusional here, or is this some sort of ruse? What does the evidence show you in that regard?
Was it a delusion that he believes, or was it a delusion that is designed as an effort to misdirect our investigation or to frankly excuse his crimes? Well, that's a good question. It certainly seems designed to excuse his crimes. Okay. Thank you all. Appreciate it.
His court appearance?
It's not yet scheduled. It should be probably later this week if I had to guess.
One more thing. Was there any evidence that he tried to go after Senators Klobuchar and Smith? I know they're kind of the centerpiece of this letter.
No, not that we know of to date. Obviously, the investigation remains ongoing and will continue, as all do.
Are you looking into any mental health aspects of this as part of the investigation, or is that something that the defense would be doing?
Like in any case, the defense could well raise his competency. I don't know. We'll see how that plays out.
Do you anticipate your office recommending death penalty? I know it's up to the Attorney General, but
It's too soon to tell. That's a holistic review that we are focused on the investigation and the indictment, and we'll turn to that here in the coming weeks. And that's something that'll be in consultation with the victims and their families, this office, as well as Department of Justice in Washington, D.C.
In regards to the letter and what he's claiming that he met with people that wanted him to threaten his family about going ahead or complying with this plan, and that he got away and later came back and shot those people, is he saying that those people were the Hortmans and Hoffmans, and that they were involved in that?
He leaves blanks for the names, and so he doesn't name the people that he claims were involved. The idea that the Hortmans or Hoffmans were involved is offensive.
All right, you've been listening to Acting U.S. Attorney Joseph H. Thompson there at the federal courthouse in Minneapolis, essentially outlining the federal grand jury indictment on Vance Boelter with details in that indictment that were unknown before. Now, essentially what they're saying today is the 6 counts that the feds laid out do have enough evidence to continue to seek those charges in this case.
Yeah, releasing a search warrant now that will detail the guns that were confiscated and where they were found and the weapons used in each of the shootings, but then also the letter that was discovered in an abandoned car near his home in Green Isle. And that's what Acting U.S. Attorney Thompson was just talking about. In this letter, he details what, and Thompson says what he calls fantasy, because they believe that Boelter acted alone. But in this letter, Boelter details that he was asked to do this, even saying that Governor Walz had asked him to commit these crimes, saying that his family was in danger. But again, Acting U.S. Attorney Thompson saying that wouldn't comment on any mental health issues, but this was fantasy, and that Boelter, they're very confident, acted alone in this.
They felt very comfortable releasing these details of the letter because of the outlandish nature of what Boelter was claiming in this letter, and as described by the U.S. Attorney, all fantasy. Probably the most resounding thing from today is that the federal charges will move forward. And as we said before, they're likely to take precedence over the 4 Minnesota charges, which were second-degree murder and attempted second-degree murder in those cases. These charges, the federal ones, are a much more serious charge. 2 of them carry the potential death penalty with them.
And they still have time to decide whether or not they would seek the death penalty on these federal charges. They also didn't mention whether or not they would consolidate the case and just have 1 trial in federal court versus 2 trials, 1 in state court and 1 in federal court. But there were a number of local officials. You saw MPD Police Chief Brian O'Hara there, and BCA Superintendent Andrew Evans as well. The Hennepin County Sheriff was in attendance. So a lot of local officials at this press conference with federal officials today.
All right, that's going to do it for this portion of the story. Thanks for joining us. We'll have much more on the story coming up on Fox 9 News at 5.